Facts is some boring subjects.
Understand the risk to our country.
Freedom brings people together.
You're listening to the We Are Libertarians Network. Learn more at wearelibertarians.com.
Hey there, it's Chris Spangle. Welcome to We Are Libertarians. I said I was going to take December off, and I've never done more shows. There is a ton for Wall Plus members. Make sure you join. There's a lot of bonus shows. I've just been getting invited on a lot of stuff, and so I've been putting that into the feeds, and this is no different. My friend Seth Tower Hurd invited me on his Facebook Live. They're working on a free market solution to help solve the student loan crisis, and wanted to talk about student loans and shared some of my thoughts, and then we picked apart their solution. And so I hope you enjoy this. Sign up for their email newsletter in the show notes. And without further ado, here's my conversation on student loans with Seth Tower Hurd.
My name is Seth Tower Hurd. He is Drew Judas. Together, we are building a solution for the student loan crisis that everybody talks about and nobody knows what the heck to do about other than just panic. And, we gave you decades to panic, and that didn't work, so we thought we'd probably have to do something else. And then the guy down there in the box at the bottom is Chris Spangle, a friend of mine. I will say I did 10 years in radio in Chicago on the network radio, and he just plugged a mic in his apartment and put a blue curtain behind him and just totally outdid me.
It's been a little more complicated than that, but yeah, no, I had a whole setup here. I'm in my apartment, a whole sound stage.
No, I mean, I've been catching your stuff for a while, so
and
it used to be more of a
and then
studio vibe.
I just don't want you people in my house anymore, and so now it's two LED lights and a black curtain. Let's go.
So if we can just intro real quick about kind of how you would be a person to be interested in talking about this. You work in radio full time. Mm-hmm. Do you do 4 podcasts? Am I correct about that?
At least I've lost count. So yeah, I do. The one that I've done the longest. So I have a day job, and that's basically professional podcasting and video editing. And then my main show that I've done forever was We Are Libertarians, that I'm transitioning to the Chris Spangle Show. And then on the We Are Libertarians network, I've got Liberty Explained, which is the basics of libertarianism. And then I do the public affairs show in Indianapolis on the weekends for the iHeart cluster that's dedicated to nonprofits. And then I'm on the Pat Down with Ms. Pat, which is a comedy podcast. So
yeah. And that's how you went to Joe Rogan, and you met Mr. Joe Rogan. And,
super nice, yes,
super good guy. Yeah.
And I got to talk to Jamie, which was as a gear nerd, just as thrilling. What kind of board do you use? What's your mic level at?
Well, I mean, they do have 50 bajillion listeners, so those are decent topics to ask about. So, you actually just had on, I may throw the article up, or I may not, because this is the first time we've had 3 of us on stream. You actually just had somebody on not too long ago who wrote for National Review about student loans. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I mean, I've kind of, I've stayed in touch with your content, even as you and I have kind of found each other on the internet. I don't know that I've specifically heard you talk a ton about student loans, but this is something that, regardless of politics, everybody, we are not a partisan problem we're trying to solve, but it's certainly a political problem in a way, because government policy certainly got us here, and certainly is not helping to fix the issue at all.
Sure.
Right. So why don't, can you kind of jump in there on what your take would be on how we got to this point where people are quite literally delaying life stages because they're paying their student loans?
Yeah, I mean, I got student loans the first time I went to college. I'm actually going to college again now, and I avoided student loans, and I'm just paying in chunks and taking that interest because I don't want to take out the student loans. I want to force myself to pay it now. And I didn't ever have a lot of student loans, so it wasn't this crushing burden like some family and friends that have $600, $700, $800 a month payments right now, and they're in their mid-30s. I mean, it's a crushing amount. And when we went to high school, I mean, I graduated in 2002, and that was sort of even before it got crazy, stupid expensive. And you would sit in these big halls with guidance counselors telling you that it's just you've got to go to college. Like, you can't not go to college, because if you don't, here's the chart of you're going to make $20,000 a year. And then if you go to college, you're going to make $60,000 a year when you graduate. Well, not knowing that when I would graduate high school, we'd have the 9/11 financial downturn when my friends, fortunately, I dropped out of college and entered the workforce, which kind of gave me a leg up on friends who graduated college right in the 2008 crisis. And then right when we hit our prime earning years, we're in the middle of this crisis. And so it's, it's sort of been a constant drag. Boomers can't afford to really retire, so they're keeping in positions that they're not allowing millennials to move up as quickly as possible. Wages are really stagnant. And then you've got the biggest tax on really young Americans, which are student loans, which are really, I mean, you guys obviously do a show about student loans, so your knowledge is probably deeper than mine. But like what little I've studied about it, there's two places that really keep tuition high and student loans as a result high. And the first is the guaranteeing of federal loans, backing it by the federal government instead of private banks. My original student loans were backed by Chase, because you would go to the bank, you'd negotiate the student loan. Now it's FAFSA. It's all backed by the federal government. And when the printing press is available, there's really not much consideration. But the one piece of rising college tuition costs that people don't think about is the increasing demands for government to cover Medicare and Medicaid on the state level. And so,
whoa, can you connect that together on how that pushes up students?
Yes, because the federal government has a printing press. You can, it's modern monetary theory, print all day long. It doesn't matter what you do. But your state and local budgets, they don't have that luxury. They can't inflate currency. They can't print money. They have a static pot of money, and they live next to the people that they raise taxes on. So they're not hiding in Washington, D.C. in the Russell building. So there's not a big willingness to raise money, taxes. And so when Obamacare came in 2008, you already had many states that already had some version of Medicare and Medicaid. And then Indiana, for instance, had built the Healthy Indiana plan. And so if you're low wage or a low earning person, I've had many friends who have relied on the Healthy Indiana plan to get their medical insurance. And those costs have crept up and up and up. And so Obama in 2000, right after the Affordable Care Act was passed, it was part of the Affordable Care Act, the federal government said, we'll give you a block of money and you can apply that to your Medicare, Medicaid system, which is what Indiana did, and they funded the Healthy Indiana Plan 2.0. Or you can adopt like a federal version of it. And the cost for state governments in terms of providing this health insurance became astronomically expensive. And so when you have one bucket that becomes really expensive, all of a sudden they have less money to spend on high K through 12 teacher pay for, the state colleges, the state college system. It's part of the reason why Mitch Daniels, when he was governor of Indiana, now head of Purdue University, which has had dropping tuition because he's a genius. He helped found WGU, an online university, to kind of help pioneer a state college online network of schools. And I've had many friends go to WGU and get great educations from that and finish their degrees in an easy way. And that kind of helps spear a lot of the technology that colleges are scrambling to adopt in 2020. As we look to the government, state and local governments, to fulfill all these mandates, to start to do, more and more and fund more and more, you're going to see colleges go, well, I'm not getting state dollars. We're not getting state grants for the private or the public universities. We've got to raise tuition. And so that's been a hidden factor in the rise of tuition costs. And so what everybody needs to recognize is that every time we advocate for the government, the federal government, a state government, a local government to do something, there is a finite amount of money. And that's going to take from other budget priorities, and so, but the need is not going to stop, which is why I'm a libertarian. I don't think that model of public spending is a smart one, because scarcity exists and people never think that they have enough and they always want more. And, the private market usually works that out a lot more efficiently than a public funding model.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The money machine go burr.
Right.
It's a fairly recent meme, but it's a fairly old practice,
Yeah.
unfortunately. By the way, if you want to, I'm tagging you on the socials, man. If you want to share the live feed or whatever,
I will. I think I did
there.
on Facebook, but I will on Twitter too.
Okay. Yeah, I just hit you on Twitter as well. Man, when you simulcast, the audio feed on Twitter is just terrible. So if you are over there, we're on Facebook and YouTube as well. If you want to go check this out live, I would recommend that you jump over to one of those other ones and you'll miss 30 seconds of what we have to say, but it's going to be all right. I promise.
It could be the most profound 30 seconds. So why take the risk?
Well, no, it's not going to be that profound because I need you to share it on social. I mean, I don't know how good you are. If you can come up with another that. It's funny. I had not made that connection. That was really good stuff. Drew, had you heard of that stuff before? About specifically about the rise in tuition being connected to the other.
No, you know what? I have done some reading and I had not connected the two, but it really makes perfect sense. And the way I'm looking at how the government funds student loans and how the universities and the schools look at that is, I mean, they have their guaranteed payout, right? They can charge $40,000 a year and they're going to get their money because the burden of payment will be transferred then to the student who will be forced to pay that over the course of their lifetime. I mean, it's easy money for the schools. And if I were a university, I could, if I'm charging 40 now, if I would say to myself, if I really wanted to make some money, I could charge 60 and I'd probably still get it. Because again, there's that perception that, well, these student loans, there's still that perception in the market. Well, if you go to school, you're going to get a very high paying job and your life is going to be so much better or so much more well-funded than if you didn't go to college.
Well, and if we can take a bit of a diversion here, because I'm not super, and all the weirdo Dave Ramsey people are going to be come out of the woodwork and be mad at me for this. I'm not super against borrowing something for education.
No.
But you need to be able to run the math in your head, and man, you are not taught that in high school. So it's hey,
let me stick up for Dave Ramsey. Even he will say, this, if you're gonna borrow money, this is an investment on your future. This is an investment in, what your future earnings, and it's low interest compared to a 14% interest loan to fund podcast equipment or something.
Yeah. No, I've heard him tell people not to take out loans on med school. And you're not allowed to work when you're in med school. So I don't know. I mean, just go be an amateur surgeon for a while and save up your money and
right.
do it in a country that's that's disorganized enough that you can just leave when you get sued. Go to Eastern Europe, operate on people for cash, come back and pay for American med school. I don't know how that works. And
right.
I've met Dave a few times. He's a good guy. I like him. Drew, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, if you want to do med school, like you say, when you say being an amateur surgeon, I mean, you could start a podcast or start a YouTube channel where you pop zits and you lance boils, and those things get millions and millions of views. So you're making money there. That's how I would do it.
Yeah.
So I mean,
I don't know why you're not doing it now. I would just add a segment to this show where you pop zits. I mean, if that's where the money's at, why wait?
Well,
yeah, that's right.
I think you find yourself in different situations because I do know people that have taken out, $180,000 a year to go to either Wharton or Kellogg or Booth, like the top 3 business schools, and you take out $200K, but you come out making, $250,000 to $400,000 your first job out. So, or if you're borrowing to go to, your degree in cybersecurity, you're going to come out making like 92 as a 22-year-old. I would say that's worth it. Where I feel like a lot of people are in crushing debt is because they got told they could like make their own major, or it's like, well, just follow what your passion is. I knew people that they're like, oh, I'm going to go to college for opera. And I'm like, okay.
Those are the people that, I'm going to back for history, so I can't speak, but I do a fair amount of history in my show. So for me, it's like, I'm going back for the skill of research, writing papers, that structure. Like, it's really helped me the last 3 or 4 months. And I've not really told anybody that I was going to college just because I was afraid that I was going to fail, because I do a lot of stuff. But I ended. Did you
finish? Is this grad school or did you finish undergrad?
No. I dropped out, so I'm a junior in college again, and I got an A+, a 98 out of 100 in history, and a B in Spanish, and I paid for it out of pocket, and it was a lot easier than I thought. But I'm going for skill. I'm going to learn how to write structured arguments. But if you go to Wharton or you go to Harvard Business, or you go to one of those schools, you're paying for networks. And that's what, when I produce a podcast for a guy named Robert Vane called Leaders and Legends here in town, and we interview a lot of the people who are the most successful folks in town. And inevitably, we end up back at IU in the fraternity system with a lot of the guys who have been making a lot of the decisions recently. And it's because they go, well, I got this problem, and my buddy, Dave or whatever, was really good at that in college, and I always enjoyed him. Let me call him up. And so, the world works in networks of power, and that's what you pay. That's what college is a lot of times. It's getting new networks, not just the skill set.
And I would say what I got out of college was it got me to Chicago. I mean, the 2 biggest things are important. It got me to Chicago, got me into media, got me meeting people, and then I left with the network. And it's not that it's not the stuff I learned didn't matter, but the stuff I learned didn't change my life the way that those 3 things changed my life.
Right.
And so that's actually kind of, when you said that, that they're doing the online school thing, I think that's cool if you've got to check a box of you need a degree for a licensure, teacher, lawyer, whatever. If you're in something that's more soft skills, I think I worry about, even if it's cheap, doing that, because you might be better off just going and doing whatever.
Well, if you have your network already, if you work for a while and you have a network established, that network that you might get in a university like a fraternity system might not be as critical. I shake my head at a place like an Ivy League, or without naming names, because I don't want to disparage any of these schools. But if I want to be a social worker or some kind of counselor, I could go to Northwestern. There you go. I could go to an expensive school and get a pretty good education as a social worker. But once I get out of the school, regardless of my network, I'm a social worker. I'm making $24,000 a year. I'm making $25,000 a year, maybe. And I have one of the finest educations available in the nation. But that network, even if I do have a good network, that's not going to hook me up with a social work position right out of school making $100,000. I mean, people are social workers all their lives and they struggle to break 60 or 70. So, which again is a nice living, but the return on investment is not there. And the network,
well, and it's not a nice living the whole time. If you're trying to pay heavy student loans on that salary, it may not be a nice living for decades.
A lot of this is I dropped out and I worked hard, and I knew I had to work harder than everybody else, because my name would be at the bottom of the pile or in the trash can, because I didn't have that commitment to finish a degree versus other people. But it was that determination, it was that work ethic that got me to where I'm at now, along with mentors. Just people, my 30s have been successful because I've had great mentors invest in me versus my 20s where I didn't listen to anybody, and so, and so by the time I got my 30s together and listened to people who were more successful than I, and it worked out okay, and that all of this, there's it's your networks, it's your education, it's mainly what you do with it, how hard you work. I mean, it comes down to the individual. And like this conversation, so this show that I do now, that I've thought a lot about how does a person become successful, or how do they build wealth, or how do they build a solid career? And again, it's mentors, it's networks of power, it's good education, it's that good foundation. And what I've learned through the Now Hear This show is that there are a lot of families from economically disadvantaged families that nobody has gone to college and nobody knows how to fill out a college application. So nobody's actually getting into networks of power or getting good education because there's nobody like leading them down that path. And that's where like I look at a lot of the diversity stuff that's going on and I go, yeah, we need to help lift people up who generationally may not have had access to these networks. And now let's make sure they get into college and help mentor them into networks of power and lift these communities up.
Well, actually, if I can speak to that, one of the things that drives me nuts, that I really got in a pretty significant argument with a friend about was that I was at Subway, the smoking of food, because the smell of the bread like gets into your clothes like cigarettes.
Yeah, you're so right.
But my wife likes it once in a while, so I picked it up. And I bought. Skid was in line. He's like, "Hey man, can I get a Coke or something?" And I could just kind of tell like he was doing DoorDash or something. So what's going on is like the dude probably didn't have any money until the end of the night when he cashed out his his gig economy gig. I was like, "Hey dude," I'm like, "I got this one." I kind of know what it's like to be like, have $3 in checking. So I got it. Grab something, just kind of chill for a second while they're making the sandwiches. And I was like, "So what's next for you, man? I mean, I see you're working hard." And and he was like, "Oh, I'm going to try to get on Amazon." I was like, "Well, what could you do after Amazon?" I was like, "What if you thought about welding?" I was like, "You're not going to weld for the rest of your life, but dude, you go to school at night for 3 months, you come out, you're making pretty freaking good money. Do that for a couple of years, put some money in the bank when you're 20, 21 years old. Like you got a lot of options, man." He's like, "Oh, it's really cool." So I was like, "Oh, here's my number. Hit me if you ever like you got any questions or I can help you. I'm new to town, but hit me up." And I live in I live in North County, St. Louis, pretty close to Ferguson. I believe statistically in the last census, the town was 80% black, 20% white, I believe, that I live in. And I communicated this story to a friend, and the friend said, "Well, did you have like empathy or something like that?" And I was like, I swore. So I turned my mic off, and I just like, yeah, this dude doesn't need empathy. He needs a job that's not garbage,
right?
Like that would be what he needs.
And I bet that if you asked him, that's what he's looking for.
Yeah, like he doesn't care what I feel in my
wait, they were mad that you took the time to have a conversation with a stranger?
They were mad that I wasn't more empathetic, and I'm like, you know what, like. You haven't been broke before, because when you're broke, when I was 19 working 3 jobs, like with my back against the wall, helping my mom pay the bills, I didn't need empathy. I needed strength. Like I needed strength to just get through it, and I needed a freaking solution.
Right.
Like I didn't care what anybody like I don't know. I mean, sometimes I don't know if I should say that. I was like, sometimes I just wish that like, maybe Kim Jong-il would win. Like we just get nuked because just like the self-righteous white people, like, I'm like, well, maybe if we're all just dead, I won't have to listen to you anymore. Like it might be. Drew's like taking that seriously.
Can I say the scourge of the white liberal? Is that acceptable in this program? I mean,
yeah.
That's reason. I mean,
I feel like I'm more woke than most people, but man, when I hear stories like that, I'm just like, you took the time to connect to somebody, hear their story, give them a suggestion instead of like, what did they want? Like crying on the guy crying on your shoulder about what? Like the guy, right. And that, I've had that conversation about the trades too. Like I have a friend who is like 24 now, probably making 8 times the amount of money as an electrician that I'm making, and you're just like, my little nephew, I am going to push him into the trades. Like, I worked on construction sites. Those guys made a great living. There is, I worked with Rupert's kids for a long time. That is a lot of vocational training for kids getting out of the criminal justice system. And Rupert's like telling these kids that a college track is right for them is like telling them that they can be president of the United States. Like, there's nobody in their family that encourages that. They don't think that they're capable of that until somebody like a Rupert comes along and tells them that, and so, but if you can get them a trade, if you can get them on a construction crew or a drywalling crew, and they can get a little money in their pocket and stop being picked on by the criminal justice system, all of a sudden, oh, wow, anything's possible. Because I'm at a different place, the economic security is just so foundational. It's like liberals will pick on libertarians and conservatives for talking about economics, and it's not about greed. It's that the economy is people's hopes and dreams and self-actualization, and it's important. And college is important, and that's why I think there's just so much anxiety around student loans and the cost around college, is because we've been built up into this place that we think if I don't go to college and pay the $200,000 toll to get to my future, then I'm not going to make it. And like, I've got to tell you, like, I got my first internship at a radio station because of college. It was certainly a worthwhile investment. Yeah. Going for 4 years and getting a 1.93 GPA. I wish I had been a more equipped student, but at the end of the day, like, I'm waking up every day doing exactly what I dreamed about doing at 8 years old, and I didn't need a college degree to get there. It's just if you have determination and you are annoying enough to knock on enough doors to get in the right doors, then you can get to where you're at in any industry, but you've got to put some effort behind it. And without some security, it's hard to do that.
Drew, go ahead.
Yeah, well, if I could go back to your point about you mentioned a lot of families who don't know how to fill out a college application. They don't know how to get to that level where they get to college. And they're looking. You have a family who has the first person go to college or post-secondary education for that the family has ever seen, which is a great thing. Don't get me wrong. And I think we have not great, but I mean, there are folks, there are places, and there are organizations set up to help a person with that. But unfortunately, and you mentioned working hard, and you mentioned, knocking down doors. If that's the goal, and hey, great, we've gotten this person to college, awesome. But I think that there's a lot of education that stops saying, hey, great, you're in college, but now you have to realize that person could then become another one of the statistics that now has $200,000 in college debt. They have a college degree, but now they've gotten out and their first job is making 50, and they become, I guess, another, I don't want to say victim, but, they're knocking down the wrong doors. Because, they're working hard, but they have that burden of the student loans because no one's ever told them, or there's been no means to say, hey, this is what it's going to cost you. This is what you can expect to make. You need to be smart about that as well.
I think trading one kind of broke for another, essentially.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Thank
like
you.
there is, and that's why I think mentoring is so huge, and that's one of the reasons I do now hear this, the public affairs show in Indy, like the Starfish Initiative, pairs cross-cultural adults with children who are academically gifted from ages like 8 to 14 or 15, and they try to match them. Like if this child's showing promise in STEM, they try to match them with somebody who's in a different, like the kid from the poor white neighborhood will be paired with an affluent person from the north side that may be black. Like they try to do different things to cross-pollinate networks, and they essentially are helping these kids get on track. Like there's Big Brothers, Big Sisters, who I interviewed, I think today or yesterday, and that mentoring program is not just about education but life skills. Like just when you get a big brother, big sister relationship with a little brother or sister, when they have somebody outside of their family just showing interest in them and helping them kind of guide them towards a different path and giving them some advice, like it helps them shape some of that early stuff quickly. You know, there's great programs in my town, and I'm sure it's in your town because a lot of these are national organizations that are really trying to dig down, like the Lumina Foundation. Sally Mae converted massive amounts, like $5 or $7 billion into this endowment and created the Lumina Foundation. And I think it's the biggest nonprofit in the nation. And if you want to hear more about them, the Leaders and Legends podcast, we talked to their CEO at the Lumina Foundation. Their whole goal is basically to mentor kids from middle school to high school because of exactly what you're talking about. So Indianapolis is where the Friedman Foundation is located, the Milton Friedman School Choice Foundation, the Lumina Foundation. Like, there's all these like education-focused, the Crystal DeHaan Foundation. And what all of these groups have found is that if you have adults that give a shit, if I may curse, excuse me, that give a darn about... I said
something worse to that when I turned off my mic,
yes,
so we're probably fine.
If they actually take the time to kind of get out of their comfort zones and go work with younger people and talk about their career experiences, then you have a better chance of those kids not wasting money on student loans, not wasting their time in college, getting college credits in high school. They're better prepared because having those conversations with somebody who is an outside adult who's like, this is what your career is like. You know, there's even now there's like all these charities. I think it's EdgeX, like where they're pairing adult mentors with adult workers because they're like people just starting out in their career, because the whole idea of mentoring and working with folks to kind of help grab some clarity in this work environment where it feels like it's really difficult, and I know that it is very difficult for a lot of people, but we're also at a point, I think, where there's so many more things that are possible. Like I never, ever, 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 ever would have dreamed that a significant portion of my income would come from podcasting. You know, I mean, and it's something that I never thought until about this year that I thought I would be able to do full time. But the internet and the markets and the economy have expanded to a point where it is financially possible for me to do that. You know, you look at Substack and writers can make a living being writers. So, you know, and that's the liberal arts sphere, but there's just so many different pieces of opportunity all around. And, you know, if you want the student loan crisis to kind of end and not have the barista with the $300,000, like go mentor some kids today. Like go join Big Brothers Big Sisters, Lumina Foundation, like the Starfish Initiative, those kind of things in your town, because having that conversation an hour a month with a kid who's 12, 13, 14, they're going to go, like when I go speak at schools, these kids, like, where can I get a B&H catalog? Start circling things. Like, it just lights their mind on fire when they start thinking about possibilities that they never considered.
Well, we need to, you know, and I believe you got to be up pretty early, so we're not going to go past the hour mark. We need to tell you about what we're building, because I'm going to get your reaction to that. But before we do that, two things. Number one, I actually really do want to see if I can get into Big Brothers Big Sisters or something like that, because you know, I'm 38, but I'm kind of a loser. Maybe no, I'm kidding. I would. That's something I'd really like to volunteer with. But we are seeing a lot, you know, kind of on Twitter and the blogosphere about student loan forgiveness right now. Mm-hmm. My biggest fear there is that people are going to make even worse decisions. And it's not like, oh, we're building this website, and then if the student loans are forgiven, then that was stupid. Why did we do that? My biggest fear is that people will make even worse decisions because they saw the loans get forgiven. So why don't I take out, you know, cost of living loans on top of my other loans and just like freaking live like Kanye West for 4 years, because it's going to get forgiven. And I mean, I'm afraid this thing's going to get a lot worse if there is, I mean, you know, as much as it would maybe, you know, help individuals, I worry about society, and I worry about Like the whole thing just blowing up if that happens.
You were referring to my interview with Brad Palumbo recently,
yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
like libertarians love warning about moral hazards. You know, the fact
and
that
Star Wars,
right? Go watch The Big Short. Nobody went to jail for what you see in The Big Short. Nobody learned anything about the moral hazards of the bailouts in 2008. And so when we have our next big crisis in 2020, the trough is open at even bigger, much like $750 billion was controversial in 2008. That was like batting an eye in 2020. You know, the moral hazard of just kind of like, you know, if there's a crisis, you don't need to save money. We've got you. We'll send you $1,200 for 8 months. You know, if there's a crisis, don't worry, airlines. You don't need to have good business models. We'll bail you out. Like, and it's the same. If the trough is always open and people suffer no consequences for their decisions, like if a contract really means nothing, like everybody who signs up for a student loan is making the conscious choice. Like, trust me, my hand hovered over that button going, I'd really like an $8,000 loan. You know, I really thought about that. But then I thought, can I make a few sacrifices and like pay $600 a month, $700 a month, $400 to some months it's been $100. Like, you know, I didn't need to take 8 when 2 sufficed or 3, right? So I made a conscious choice there, and everybody else who took a student loan made a choice. And all the people who were responsible and paid off their loans and didn't wait for a bailout feel robbed. And all that does is create resentment. And that's part of the story of using the government to solve these problems, is whenever there is action by the government, there is force that follows. So anytime we ask the government to do something, they pass a law, a police officer then has to enforce that law. And then when we add laws, so many laws like drug laws, and then we go, I don't understand why people hate the cops. It's because we are increasingly asking them to do more, enforce more, and force more people to live the way that we think they ought to live. Like at the end of the day, we're looking at the government to kind of take away the consequences of our choices, take away the consequences of signing those contracts, take away the consequences of not saving money, take away the consequences. And the moral hazard of that is deeply, deeply impactful on our society. And this is just another one of those instances. Yeah, there would be a somewhat of in individuals' lives, there would be a lot of people who would really benefit from having those student loans washed away. But it would come off the backs of the people that acted responsibly or had made different choices or who had never gone to college. So in effect, you're taking like tax money from poorer people and transferring it to middle class people. Like,
yeah,
you know,
I've seen a decent amount of people talk about that on Twitter. Like,
yeah.
Hey, I went into the trades and you like partied your face off with Miller Lite for 4 years. And now I might have to pay for you, and I'm just not cool with it.
And a lot of that is not totally fair, but it's the resentment that is bred by government action. You know, there is no way to fight the coronavirus except for personal responsibility and people getting good information and making the right choices. You can't pass enough laws to make people behave, and the more you try to clamp down, the more resentment you breed. You know, it's a great example of the division that government action creates. Like the NCAA and NBA start shutting down out of goodwill for their fans, and everybody's like, yeah, maybe we ought to rethink our events. And then like the government says, all right, time to lock down. And everybody's like, where's my pitchforks? You know? And so that's going to have the same effect where we have a divided society, and giveaways is just, and creating more moral hazards is only going to make the society more tense when we need to be going the other way. You know, so what can we do instead of looking to the government to give away free money? What can we do to kind of innovate our way out of this? Like I go to a mega church on the South Side.
Fantastic segue.
They just gave away.
Yeah, that was a fantastic. Wait, where do you go, by the way? Just real quick.
Mount Pleasant Christian Church, who gave away $7 million in student loan relief this year alone.
Dang. Okay. Well, that's almost exactly what we're talking about. For some reason, I thought you were Catholic. I don't know why, man.
I was.
You made it. Oh, you were.
My grandmother is very unhappy that I went Methodist and then Baptist. So, but we don't talk about that.
All right. Well, as far as the innovation goes, man, this is part of and this isn't like we just wanted to get you on to like endorse our idea or grab the eyeballs of people who pay attention to you. We thought you'd be an interesting person to have this conversation with. And this whole thing started with Drew calling me, and I get these calls all the time because I've been in, I've worked with some venture-backed tech startups in Chicago and stuff, and I get all these calls like, hey, I've got this idea. And if you've listened to every single live stream, you're gonna hear a joke for the second or third time, but whatever. Usually it's along the quality lines of, like, I was at my stepbrother's birthday party and this guy was like, hey, you're in like tech stuff. I have an idea for an app. Okay. An app that calculates your overtime. And I'm like, what's your wage? And he told me, and I'm like, there's your overtime, because I did it on the calculator on my phone. So usually it's somewhere along the lines of that.
It's called Harvest.
It's a time and a half your wage, dude. It's not that hard. Did you work 3 hours overtime? 3 times 1.5. Boom. But this was the call where I was like, oh, there's something here. And so Drew called me and said, I've been thinking about this for a long time. And, Drew, it's not like you were the one that was crushed under student loan debt in the last 6 months. So you started thinking about this. You saw this problem societally. And
I had been collecting stories in my mind for a number of years about, and again, just getting to know people and watching people who were young, who were out of school with that look in their eye that are ready to take on the world. But 5-6 years into it, they are still struggling to make ends meet, driving used cars, living in their parents' basement with a relatively decent job because of student loans. And when I went to school, when I went to school, it was still probably outside of the realm. But back in the day, when people went to school, they could work during the summer to fund their tuition, right? We're talking 30, 40, 50 years ago. But that could still be done relatively easily. It was a realistic endeavor. So that's what led me to this idea. And I have a lot of bad ideas. So I talked to Tower.
I see the horse head in the back. I get it.
Yeah. So, not everything works out for Drew here, so right. So I've got a lot of regrets in the background, as you can probably see. But this idea is, you want me to just kind of roll it out?
Yeah.
Okay. So
we got like 11 minutes. So
we talked. We've talked about the issues and the problems that come from a government nanny state or a government funded solution to all my problems, all of society's problems. So what I talked to Tower about is this would be a crowdfunding exercise, a crowdfunding effort. So what we're doing then is offering people who have gone through the system, if you will, who have earned a degree, who now have a level of student debt. So these people would essentially have a space to tell their story about, hey, here's why I went to school for this particular focus in this particular major, and here's what I'm doing now, and here's where I'm at, and this is what I want to do in my life. Kind of, so give them an opportunity, a forum to tell their story and say, hey, I need some help, and this is what I do. So essentially what it is, it's a crowdfunding exercise, a crowdfunding space for folks to put up a profile, and then people like me who want to help out and contribute to education, but I don't give to my alumni. I don't give to my alma mater anymore, because every time I gave money to them as an alumni, they turn around and raise tuition 6-7%.
We need a new giant $1 billion building.
Right, exactly. A communication center. I'm like, for who? Who do you need to communicate with that you can't communicate? Anyway, so I don't give money to them, but I still have this money that I want to give. So the money then would go directly to the holders of this student loan to help them pay down the debt. So this is an opportunity to fund someone who's carrying this burden because they believed somewhere along the line in the story that hey, if I go to school, that's the right thing to do. Or I'm going to school for a purpose because I want to help society, because I want to be a teacher, because I want to be a social worker, because I want to be a nurse or a doctor. And I've bought that narrative. And now I'm a nurse, and now I'm a social worker, now I'm a teacher, and I did all the right things, but my life is suffering, and I'm in financial trouble because of it. So this is an opportunity for folks who maybe be able to sympathize with them, or kind of say, hey, I've been there, to look at their profile and say, yeah, this person, they are trying to do the right thing, but just the state of our education system has really given them an unnecessary burden for doing the right thing. So I'd like to help out. So here's $20. Here's $30.
And let me say too, I mean, and I'm kind of the person who's coming in having battled through some, pretty heavy student loans, and that's still kind of unpack, kind of the story of my family on a different episode. But, the way I've been able to handle it, quite frankly, is that I've been able to I've never had one job as an adult, which I actually recommend. I think everybody ought to have a second source of income. But had I not had the gift of extreme extroversion, I don't know what I would have done, because quite frankly, a lot of the doors that have opened up have not been just because of skill. It's because I'm such a weirdo that I talk to everybody, like this dude at a charity event 15 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how we got here. And had I not had those connections along the way. And so for me to think about this problem and say, well, I think that everybody ought to do what I did. Certainly you can take agency over your own life. I cannot expect everybody to replicate what I've been able to do. Because part of that is just God-given thing that no matter what kind of mentor you get, you're probably not going to get. Everybody can get better. Not everybody is, going to be mega successful. And so it's what do we do with those other people who are, have wonderful things to bring to the world, but extreme extroversion, and sort of a nose for what's profitable are not in their wheelhouse. So what are we going to do for them? And that is, we believe the community can help get people out of this place where they're delaying life stages is the thing I keep thinking about. I can't buy a house. I'm not going to get married. I'm not going to have kids because I'm just too broke. So I'm just going to keep living at home and paying $1,200.
Yeah, I think, in that pitch, essentially, as I would call it, it's very heavy on people's empathy. And if you're going to craft something, people like game shows and competition more than they like sad stories. And so
that's pretty good.
So I think that ought to be your guy. I will watch Shark Tank all day long, but it's hard to get people to listen to Now Hear This. It's like it takes a special kind of person who wants to hear here's the sad story and here's how it's being fixed. But if you can gamify it a little bit by making pitches or some sort of competition or some sort of tier system, there's an app out now that does in-app podcasting, and you can take phone calls, and it's called Stereo. They have $25,000 up a week, and you're basically and it's sort of it's a gamification to get people in there using the app, and you can compete, and that little gamification goes a long way. And so if you can go to the other thing is crowdsourcing works best when you have rich people participating. And so, if you can go and write grants or get grants, you're essentially proposing somewhat of what I'm saying. What I would suggest is some sort of a grant system. The closest I've ever come to thinking about writing a grant was Audible right now has a $10,000 reward for special podcasting.
We just talked about that yesterday.
We're in on it. Yes.
Yes, exactly. You see the $10,000, you go, all right, I'm going to write this pitch. Here's what I'm going to do with your money. Here's how I'm going to make it great. Then they evaluate it through this set system of rules. That's how you ought to think about this is
by the way, you're on so many podcasts, you don't even know how many podcasts you're on.
That's why I didn't apply, because I just...
Oh, you didn't?
No, but what I really wanted to apply for was, what has come out of Now Hear This and Leaders and Legends is there was a group of city leaders in Indianapolis, bipartisan, called the City Committee, that in the 70s got together, Democrats, Republicans, blacks, whites, Latinos, atheists, Christians, this group of city elites basically said, what do we want Indianapolis to be like in 50 years? And that single group like put partisanship above everything. So like when education is a problem in Indianapolis, it's never how can the Republicans get up on the Democrats and vice versa. Like it's how do we work together? And I think that's a really interesting story because that single germ of an idea has infected so much. So has the Lilly Endowment, so many of our nonprofits here in town, and has created such a great cooperation between nonprofit, government, private organizations, the Speedway, the Pacers, like, you know, and so when you can get all these groups kind of together to kind of circle back to this idea, if you can go to a big, if you can find a big sponsor or two, and you can have them help put up some of the prize money, but then have it padded by people pitching in $5, $10, $25 towards the thing that they like, almost like a Kickstarter model, then that can help. But like the person has to make a pitch as to what their life is going to look like on the other side of this down payment on their student loans. Like if you once I got my $13,000 paid off, like all of a sudden I'm able to buy better podcast equipment and I could start this business and I could do this and that. And like, it would have made me think about it in the way that Audible program makes you think about it a little bit more. And then all of a sudden it becomes, I want to be an investor in this person's dreams, as opposed to this is a really sad sack I need to give $5 to. So think that's how I would kind of position it. I'd make it, like watch Slumdog Millionaire a couple times and see how you can get some flashing lights and gamify it a little bit.
Sure. And we've thought about, there's some opportunities for, okay, well, let's put up a leaderboard. Let's say like, all right, well, okay, here we go. So this month, folks from this university have donated X amount of dollars and we can rate it by university as far as the total amount of student loan dollars donated. We can rate it by maybe major, by total amount of dollars donated. So, that's a great point where we're talking about gamifying it. I like the idea of offering the grant and potentially choosing someone almost like, hey, we need you to write an essay about why, where you're going or what you're going to do with this money, and we'll pick somebody every month, and you'll get either a monetary prize or maybe some extra exposure to the community. Because that's what it's about. It's about giving people hope. It's about, this is how my life would be different, and this is how I would be more of a contributor to society if I didn't have this student loan debt. We're trying to, I think on a bigger movement, if you will, we're trying to normalize the idea that it's okay to say, hey, you know what, I really have this burden of student loan debt, and it's keeping me from these dreams, keeping me from doing, realizing my full potential. Nobody minds, like you say, Tower, GoFundMe, made it okay, I guess, or made it more okay to ask for help with, say, medical bills, right?
Yeah. And that I've seen a bunch of negative articles about that. It's like, oh, well, X amount of people, are now turning to GoFundMe to pay their medical bill. Well, it's because it's working.
Right.
I mean, that's great. I mean, how great is it that people will help other people like stay out of bankruptcy?
No. Let's not exercise our empathy. Let's just let those people suffer in silence while we wait for the government to get their act together. Like those, the people who want to empower others through government action are the people who don't want anybody to be empowered. They want them to be controlled. Like those people are not real voices to listen to. Like the future of societal organization is exactly what you're talking about. It is building private institutions in that rapid cycle of creative destruction of this isn't working anymore, let's get a new one, and we will eventually in the next 100 to 200 years realize the thing holding us back from prosperity is the government, and it is not a solution. Utilitarian wise, it is just a drag. And so this is a great way, not just the like the GoFundMe model or like a website or whatever. Use these stories and make a storytelling podcast out of it too, because the bigger, not just the loans and the individuals you're paying off. You nailed it when you said we want to kind of change the conversation around this and get people thinking in a different way about their debt. And And you may get a movement started through this project that, like, all of a sudden a lot of these nonprofits, like the Sally Mae nonprofit that I talked about, the Lumina Foundation, goes, all right, how can we, like, help fund some of this stuff? How can we, how can Dow Chemical, how can we invest in some of this stuff? And, there may be strings attached with all that stuff, but, it's no different than a teacher who is, I have a friend who has to be a teacher for the school system for 7 years to get their loans forgiven. Okay, well, you better believe that if I were 150 in debt, that I would just work for them for 7 years. So
absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, there's a lot here.
And we're trying to create a space. I think that down the road we can say, or someone can say, I'm getting married, rather than giving me a stainless steel fondue set,
right,
which was actually my go-to wedding gift when I was in my 20s. Take that money, go over here to this website and pay some money against my student loan. Here's my registry. A part of it is a link to, help me pay off my student loan so I can get a house.
Yeah.
And so I can support myself and I can put a little money away for the future. I can learn how to invest.
Mom asked what I wanted for Christmas. I said tuition money. I don't need presents.
Bingo.
I spent all my tuition money on stuff I wanted, so just give me tuition money.
I actually asked for an electric scooter. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. I'm looking forward to that.
Okay. I don't even know what these. Is it like the ones you can like rent in city centers for like
something like that? But it's a little bit more, consumer. So
he's going to be the coolest kid on campus.
Exactly.
Guys, we're at the hour mark. This was really good, Chris. If you got maybe in 6 months something like that, we get a little closer to in 6 months, this thing will be out in the world, and so a really valuable kind of. Man, I mean, you really brought stuff to the table we had not thought of, and you brought research to the table that obviously the history degree you're paying for is is working. Is your Spanish any good or no?
No. I am very bad at foreign languages, and I'm very thankful that there's a check my work button on the bulk of the points. So I struggle my way through it. I'm going to get through it. I'm taking one class next year, but continuing my Spanish, and then I have a math, and then I just get to take stuff I like journalism, history. So yeah, I'm taking my time. I'm on the 5-year plan, so I'm not in any rush.
I'm going to blame somebody else for my my lack of Spanish. When I was in college, I got hit by a car on my bike, and I wound up in the hospital and everything. So I get out of the hospital and I go to class, and I explained that I'd missed a class because I'd been in the hospital because I'd gotten hit by a car, and the Spanish teacher called me a liar. And I think that is just the reason I never learned Spanish, because I was so jaded after that experience that I just didn't want to study hard for that person.
I relate to that because I got food poisoning from Taco Bell at 10, and it just soured me from there, man. That's
so now, joke. Did the Spanish teacher call you a liar in English, or did he say it in Spanish? Because that could have been a teachable moment there.
Yeah. My college roommate in our Intro to Fine Arts class, he explained that he was colorblind, red, green, and efficient after a quiz, and he probably failed the quiz because he just could see the painting in gray, basically. And that professor, who was utterly insane, called Chris a liar and demanded that he get a note. So, I mean, I'm glad we ended such a dynamic conversation about stupid things about professors said. That was really a good way for me to go out. Chris, I put a link to your Twitter handle in the description. That's on the Facebook, YouTube, Twitter versions of this video, Twitch even. We actually had somebody that watched the whole thing on Twitch last week, and I just couldn't believe it.
I will have my waifus check that out.
Your what?
My waifus. Anybody who's on Twitch just love that joke. That's all I'm saying. It's an anime joke.
It's an anime joke.
It's like an anime word for wife, and I don't get it. But my anime loving co-host was like, "Waifu's are big on Twitch." So,
well, are you making all these memes?
No. I make some, but a lot of it is people send it to me because they know This would be funny if you post it.
You shared. Okay, well, because you had the one about like, about having to be awake at 9 p.m., which you're that's why we got to quit because you're in Eastern. You and Drew are both in Indiana, but you're in Eastern time zone in Indiana. He's in Central time zone in Indiana, which is another.
What are you in Vincennes? Or are you in Valparaiso?
I am further west. I'm in Munster, which is just south of Hammond.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
the region.
Mm-hmm. The region, yes.
Yes, we basically live in two different states. Like, we're two different countries. Like, basically,
right.
Yeah,
right. Exactly. My governor is Pritzker, right? My mayor is Lightfoot.
Well, no, I mean, that's because J.B. Pritzker thinks he is the emperor of all the sun touches.
Right.
I'm expecting him to come get me for moving out of Illinois. Like, I'm expecting the black helicopters to just show back up and be like, "You thought you could leave."
No, you're just gonna get the bill in the mail. You're just gonna get the invoice. He doesn't have time to deal with you. You just need to send a check.
Yeah.
By the way, when I was Ubering on the side, partially to pay student loans, I wound up picking up his one of his staffers, who was gay with his partner, and they got into a big argument because his staffer's partner thought the staffer was like hitting on me, but they're like doing this like in my, I mean, I'm straight, I'm married, whatever. His staffer wasn't hitting on me. I wasn't offended.
I would have been like,
I was uncomfortable with the conversation happening, like with me. Like it's like the sitcom joke where like they zoom back out and like the person they're talking about is like sitting right there. So that's also what I always think of with J.B. Pritzker. Sorry, Chris.
That's
You
okay.
have the last word on that topic.
Yeah, I don't make the memes, and I don't do I don't podcast after like 6 p.m. anymore. Like, we moved to Saturday mornings, and now all my energy after 8 p.m. is just like, I'm too tired to podcast. I'm 37 now.
Yeah.
All right. Well, my newly Methodist friend, if we have you come back on in half a year or so.
Baptist.
That's right.
Are you Baptist now?
Well, I go to a non-denominational mega church, so it's Baptist. I mean, let's call it what it is. They're dunking people.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I'd love to, and I'd love to have you guys on once you get something solidified and have you come on the Chris Spangle Show and talk about this.
That would be excellent. That'd be fantastic. You are the new Saturday morning cartoons because you're on Saturday mornings, right?
Yep, exactly.
All right, everybody. Chris Spangle, check out his stuff. He's a good dude, and our paths will cross again.